Hey there and welcome back to Ping Spike. Yeah, that's right, I actually finished my introduction yesterday and it only cost me 12 hours of my life that I'm never gonna get back. Now in case you didn't watch that introduction video, and I don't blame you, this channel is basically my high school senior project where I'm trying to help as many people as I can get better at sports and esports through online content creation like this on YouTube. Now taking a bit of a step back from getting better at esports, I wanted to start off the channel just with getting into esports. So this video is a bit of a guide on computer hardware, which is also known as just everything that's inside of the computer case, plus the case. This video is for people who are looking to buy parts for building their first computer, or even people who have bought their first pre-built computer and have no idea what the heck is inside of their own computer. Trust me, if you have bought a complete computer that you didn't have to build, you still have to know about all of the parts that are in there in case that you need something like repairs, or you want to upgrade it later in the future, and also just to have general conversations revolving around parts with other people. And don't forget that all of this is just beginner level stuff, so as soon as you start building better computers later on, you're gonna need more parts because things get more expensive and bigger and need more cooling. But for now we're just gonna focus on the basics of what really makes an intro level gaming PC. And for everybody who's going to be buying their computer parts, I'm going to have buying tips for each part individually. Here's two major buying tips just to start off before even naming the parts. Your best friends are going to be Amazon, eBay, and Newegg. They're going to have all of the computer parts that you need on sale all the time, so you can always just depend on them to have everything that you want. The second tip is that it has been the worst past few months to buy computer parts ever, honestly. And if you want somebody to blame for that, then blame Amazon and Nvidia. The prices of some parts that are really highly desired by anybody with any level of experience in esports have tripled or quadrupled in price, and that's why I depend on eBay a lot for price ranges. So, let's talk about the 7 parts that make up the intro level gaming PC. Okay, I'm gonna do this all in one take. I'm gonna try to be quick and easy. I'm gonna go through every part as if it was me buying the parts to build my first computer, and it's all gonna be the quality that everybody's first computer should be at. I'll make sure to give all the information that you need for each part, stuff like the price, what it does, and just general tips that you need to know before buying it and when having it. Okay, so let's start with the case. It just basically holds everything. The best way to get your first case is just going to Amazon and looking up something like PC gaming case. The first case that you get, you're going to want pre-installed fans. You'll know if the fans that are in the picture are pre-installed if you just go to the description of the case. So, I'm blind. 2 fans included for optimal internal airflow. Pre-installed fans are going to get rid of a huge hassle because buying separate fans just adds an extra part that you need to get. And also the only problem that you'll ever have with pre-installed fans is that sometimes they may get in the way of this internal space where you need to put the motherboard in, but it's as simple as just unscrewing 4 screws, putting in the motherboard, and then putting the fan back in. Another thing that you'll see on case descriptions is tempered glass. That just means that the side panel here, once the panel's actually on, is going to be made out of glass. You'll want a tempered glass case if you're getting parts that are RGB or look nice, just so that once you prop your case up on your desk, you can easily look into it and see everything that's happening inside. Cheaper cases probably won't have tempered glass. Your first case will probably be around the $40 to $80 price range, and it's completely optional to get lights on them. The lights are probably going to add extra cost, and also your first build isn't going to be that bright just because cheaper parts don't tend to look as nice. I'll just probably go with Amazon's choice. $70 for a case, it's not terrible. Okay, so up next is the CPU. So it adds a little bit to the final frame count that you get in game, but not a whole lot. It is still a good idea to get a CPU that is equal in quality to the graphics card that you're planning to get. Any applications that aren't video games or 3D graphic design are very dependent on CPU usage. So stuff like photo, video, and audio editing, all that stuff which takes a lot of computer power but not necessarily 3D graphics, that's going to take up a ton of CPU. So if you're planning on doing something like I'm doing with video editing, then a good quality CPU is necessary. So CPU naming can be a bit complicated to somebody who's never heard or seen anything about it. The two companies that make CPUs are Intel and Ryzen, and although they both have similar naming styles, I can only really talk about Intel because that's all I've ever owned, but just know that they're not too dissimilar. Is that a word? So I'll just look up Intel CPU so you can see what I'm talking about. So all Intel CPUs start with the name Intel Core, and after that you'll see I and then a number. For some reason that's called the product modifier, but that's a dumb name, so I'll just call it the series. Higher series means better product. So an i7 is better than an i5. An i3 is worse than an i9. But the numbers that come after the series matter just as much. So the first 1 or 2 numbers that come in that 4 or 5 digit sequence tell the generation that CPU was made in. Every few years a new generation comes out. So CPUs not only get better with each series, but with each generation. If you're ever looking at 2 CPUs and you can't tell which one would be better than the other because of generational or series differences that you don't know enough about to really just look at and tell, there's a bunch of comparison websites between CPUs and GPUs that you can just look up on Google. Click on the first one that comes up and you'll be able to just put in any products that you're looking at. This will really show off that difference I'm talking about. So a 7th series processor is better than a 3rd series processor, but this one is 3rd generation and this one is 8th generation. It is less expensive to buy the processor that is lower in series but higher in generation, but as you can see, it also has a much better score than the 7th series CPU. So when buying a CPU, you have to take both factors into consideration. I'm sure Linus has a video on CPUs that explains it much better. But anyway, since you want to stay recent with your parts and you always want to make sure that they last for a while and you don't have to upgrade them for like 5 years or something, we're going to look towards getting a 10th generation CPU. This one here is at an absolutely amazing price, $160 for a very recent CPU. It's i5, which is very standard for a beginner's level build. If you maybe have extra money to spend and you want your first computer to last longer and you don't want to upgrade it as soon as you would have to, you could upgrade one series and go straight to the i7 of the 10th generation and spend about $100 more. So your first CPU is going to be anywhere between $150 and $300. Something that you'll often see in the description of the CPUs is cores. So as you can see, if Series 5 has 6 cores, Series 7 has 8 cores. I don't even know how high they get up to now, probably like 12 cores. So when a computer has multiple processes happening all at once, it can allocate those processes to different cores on the CPU. So that just means more cores means better allocation and better performance. Next up is the GPU, and similar to the CPU, it's got 2 companies that run the market. So there's Nvidia and AMD. And just like the CPU again, they have very similar naming techniques, but I've only owned the Nvidia cards, so that's all I'll be able to talk about. But just know that you can also go to the comparison websites that are all over. And if you ever want to know just which card is better than another between brands, generations, or other than that, you can use those websites. So the GPU basically carries gaming. We're going to be using eBay because good luck finding anything on Amazon that's for a reasonable price. So right off the bat, when looking at graphics card descriptions, you'll see something that says a number gigabyte. What does 2 gigabyte, 1 gigabyte, 4 gigabyte, 3... what do those all mean? That's a measurement of VRAM. When playing computer games, oftentimes while changing the graphics quality, you'll be able to see how much those graphics are taking up VRAM. The more that VRAM bar fills up, the more lag is introduced to your game. So by having a card with more VRAM, you will be able to increase the graphics quality more and more with experiencing less lag. The card that I'm running right now has 8 GB of VRAM. Another thing to note when buying NVIDIA graphics cards is that there's companies that will manufacture NVIDIA's graphics cards, and some of them do it differently than others. So if you ever see something like EVGA, Asus, Zotac, those are all still NVIDIA graphics cards, but they're just manufactured by different companies. So when looking at an NVIDIA graphics card, you'll see GTX, which just means standard graphics, but if you're getting into the more expensive and newer levels of graphics card, they'll say RTX, which just means that they have ray tracing abilities. Ray tracing just means prettier looking graphics. Some of the lower end ray tracing cards are actually worse when performing against higher end standard graphics cards. But that's not really important because the lowest end ray tracing card is probably... So we don't need to look into those. Man, just looking at these prices makes me so depressed. A GTX 1050 Ti should be like $100. Why is it $300 on sale from $500? Okay, so just like CPUs, the numbers that come straight after the term GTX or RTX matter a ton. The first two digits tell you the generation. So this is a 10th generation card. Right above it is a 7th generation card. The only ones that are really relevant today are 9th generation and 10th generation standard graphics cards. For some reason, they skipped past 11 series cards and went straight to 20 and then straight to 30 series cards right after that. And the digits after the series tell you the quality of the card within its own series. Here are the 3 main cards that are in the 10 series. The 1060, 1070, and 1080. As the numbers get higher, the graphics card gets better. But when looking at cards online, it's not very uncommon for you to see TI on a card's description. So TIs are basically like flat or sharps in music. If you know what that means, it's a half step instead of a full step. So a 1050 Ti is in between a 1050 and 1060. My 1070 Ti is the quality between a 1070 and 1080. And within the 10 series, the GTX 1080 Ti is the best graphics card. Now, a year ago, I would have said that the GTX 1060 is the best by far for beginners, but seeing its price right now and how it's gone up, I may have to reduce that and go to something like a 1050. Oh my god. Okay, not a standard 1050, because that's only a 2 GB graphics card, but a 1050 Ti, I don't know how much I trust this one. I'll just call it $200. It's gonna be really rough doing a bunch of research to try and find a good one at that price. Getting any graphics card at any quality right now is so terrible. I would honestly recommend downloading some apps to find some graphics cards locally, because those may even be more used than the stuff you'll find on eBay. And although they're more used and probably won't last as long, they're going to be much cheaper than the stuff that you'll find here. Pain. Okay, let's switch over to the motherboard. The only important thing when you're getting a motherboard is that you make sure it's compatible with the CPU that you're planning on getting. So you have to choose the CPU before the motherboard. Motherboards are usually only compatible with 1 or 2 generations of CPUs and only with one brand. So once you know the CPU that you're getting, I'll just choose this one because it's the best for beginners, the i5-10400. So what we want to do is go to Amazon and look up motherboard, Intel, 10th generation. And so these are all of the motherboards that are compatible with 10th generation Intel CPUs. It says it in the description. The motherboard holds the CPU, GPU, RAM. It's where almost all of the power supply cables plug into. There's a bunch of different companies that make motherboards. The companies don't matter at all, it's about what the motherboard supports. When you read the description of any motherboard, you'll see what it supports. Probably at the top, supports 10th generation Intel Core processors. That's what we're getting, so this will fit it. You're probably going to be paying anywhere between $100 and $200 for the motherboard. I'll choose this one for $120 since it seems to have everything that we'll need. Okay, so now we're going to use Newegg for the first time to get the next part, which is RAM. So those 4 long strips on the top right side of the motherboard are for RAM sticks. Random access memory is what's really crucial when you're doing multiple tasks on the computer at once. So if you ever want to run a dual monitor display, RAM is crucial. If you ever want to stream or watch videos while you're playing video games, RAM is very important. RAM, just like the CPU, has a very small impact on overall performance in video games. You'll get maybe just a few frames if you have more RAM. The minimum amount of RAM that you want to get for your first computer is 8 gigabytes, but I've always had and strongly recommended that you get 16 gigabytes instead of 8. On top of that, you always want to aim for dual channel RAM. So motherboards come with 2 or 4 slots for RAM. So whether you're getting 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM, you always want to run for dual channel. By using 2 or 4 sticks of RAM instead of 1 or 3, the RAM sticks are accessed at the same time, which doubles the bandwidth. Finding RAM on Newegg is as simple as just looking up 16 gigabytes of RAM. So the RAM that I'll always recommend for people who are just starting out is Ripjaw. It's just very solid and dependable RAM overall. But a year ago, it used to be like $40 to $45 for every 8 gigabytes of RAM, and now it's $100 for 16. It's not that big of a jump. I'll go ahead and say that this selection of 2 8 gigabyte sticks of RAM is the best choice. You don't really have to worry too much about anything else in the RAM's description. Alright, so next would be the power supply. This is what's just gonna power all of the parts inside the computer and what's gonna directly plug into your outlet. Power supplies are by far the easiest parts to cheap out on. The way to see the minimum amount of power that you're gonna need for your computer is by reading your graphics card's description. So the graphics card that I was planning to put in this computer was a 1050 Ti. So I'll just look up how much power that needs. It says here that the minimum amount of power you need for the 1050 Ti is 350 watts. So if we go to Amazon and just look up basic PC power supply, 600 watts, 850 watts, 750. The 1050 Ti is not a very powerful graphics card at all. And I would say that 500 watts is probably the minimum that you would want because you need to power the graphics card and everything else inside the computer, like the fans especially. So here's a power supply that's 500 watts and what I would consider the bare minimum of what you can get to power this computer that we're building. Now it's only $45, which you can look at and be happy because it's the cheapest part in the whole computer. But what I just want to remind you of is the beauty of upgradability in PCs. Gaming PCs are cool because you don't have to completely strip the computer of all of its components to put in new parts when you want to upgrade something. It's as simple as just taking off the front panel, reaching in, unclipping something, and you can pull certain parts right out. If you cheap out on the power supply, in the future when you want to upgrade certain parts like that 1050 Ti, it's going to be almost impossible to power anything past something like a 1070 because you decided to cheap out on the power supply. So this is the part where you kind of want to invest in the future. If you're using this PC for only like 4 years, you know it's only going to last you for high school or just for college, or maybe you're planning on not even using that much, like gaming isn't your full-time hobby, then absolutely you can go with a cheap power supply like this $45 one. So if your plan is to run for a long time with the same PC and you want to just keep adding parts over the course of many years, then get a power supply that you know can power parts in the future. It's only going to cost like an extra $50 to do that, so the price range for power supplies would be between $50 and $100. Next, we need to store files, like our games and our school stuff and everything else. So there's two different kinds of drives. There's the hard disk drive and the solid state drive. I strongly recommend for any gaming PC to have both. Solid state drives, or SSDs, are a lot faster and a lot stronger than HDDs. What you want to put onto SSDs are the games that you're planning to spend the most time on. For people who play competitive games, that would be those ones, because SSDs are going to largely reduce loading times and you're going to lag way less. HDDs are where you're going to put everything else. Games that you maybe don't care as much about, or huge single player games that you know will just destroy the SSD space, and all the other files that aren't gaming related that you need to hold on to. A good size for an HDD for it to last like 3 or 4 years without it being completely filled would probably be 1 terabyte, but most definitely 2 terabytes. As you can see here, it's only $10 more for double the space. So I would definitely get this 2 terabyte internal HDD. Now since I play competitive games, I need those fast loading times. So now we're gonna go look at SSDs. And now I need to explain that there's actually two different kinds of SSDs. So standard SSDs, which look like this, are faster than HDDs. But M.2 SSDs are even faster than SSDs. M.2 SSDs are smaller and they're basically plugged straight into the motherboard instead of being attached through cables. The smallest size for an SSD that I would recommend would be 256 gigabytes or a quarter terabyte. This 500 gigabyte SSD is roughly the exact same price as the 2 terabyte HDD, so I think I would recommend this size. Now I know that monitors are technically considered computer hardware, but I'm going to save that for the peripherals video next week, because we need to talk about the stuff that you actually touch, see, and hear while gaming. So let's calculate the final price of our computer. Case was $70, I think. CPU was $160. GPU, I want to say 200, but I'll just call it 250. Motherboard, and I just put IO there to remember to talk about the IO shield. Was 120, I think, the one that we were looking at. Power supply, we're gonna go just a bit more expensive than the $50 one to ensure that we can get upgrades in the future, so I'll say 80. HDD plus SSD, we're gonna get both of them. Both were, I think, $60, so 120. Then let's just assume this is my house that we're playing in, so we're gonna need a Wi-Fi dongle. I think that's an extra $20. And then we're just gonna stick with the free version of Windows for now. Oh, and if you're like me who needs 30 USB ports, you may need to get a couple extra hubs. That'll probably only be another $20. And this should cover everything that's inside the computer or sits on top of it. Okay, so according to my calculations on just the PC parts alone, that's gonna be... Ouch. Okay, let me redo this with some different parts. PC gaming case. We're going with $70, no. $50. CPU. Man, even downgrading to an i3 doesn't save you any money. The 6-core i5 is just the best deal. GPU can't really change, it's all completely luck based. Motherboard. For 10th gen Intel. Okay, this looks promising. It's only got 2 RAM slots, 1 graphics card slot, CPU bracket. Okay, well, we're gonna get 2 sticks of 8 gigabytes of RAM anyway, so this motherboard should actually work perfectly. You can basically cut that price in half. RAM, I really trust Ripjaws, but there's RAM right next to it that saves some money. Let's drop that down by $10. Power supply, I guess we'll just go with the cheaper option. But just remember that that heavily reduces the longevity of your computer. And let's look on eBay instead for an SSD. Not M.2. Okay, here's what a standard SSD should look like. 30 bucks ain't bad. Alright, let's run some recalculations. Well, now by reducing some parts, we've saved $150, $140. 2 or 3 years ago, this build would have cost $600. Pretty sure $600 is exactly what I spent for my first computer of this quality. I'll just run down the info for each part again before closing off the video. Case holds everything, CPU works with the GPU to make it work, and is also the main factor in anything that's not video games. Graphics card carries 90% of the workload with frames and graphics. It's what everybody wants. Motherboard is just a sheet with a bunch of slots where everything plugs into. Only thing that really matters about it is that it's compatible with your CPU. RAM determines how fast your computer's gonna run when you do multiple things at once, like watch videos, listen to music, or stream. Your power supply supplies power to everything in the computer. And your HDD and SSD just hold all of the files, whether it's games, homework, or anything. SSDs are much faster than HDDs, and they cost more. And that's pretty much it for all of the parts inside of an intro-level gaming PC. This is what my first gaming PC looked like. Stick around and subscribe if you want to see next week when I make a video that's exactly like this, but just talking about computer peripherals, so stuff like keyboard, monitor, mouse, headphones, all that stuff. Make sure you always read the reviews on everything that you buy, and if you have any friends, parents, or anything like that that's worked with computer parts, always talk with them. I really hope that I could help. I never want a beginner going into these kinds of things blind. And hopefully I'll see you in the future when I make some videos about video games and helping people out with sports. Have a good one.